Welcome to the Biz and Tech Podcast. My name is Blake Dowling. I'm the CEO of Aegis Business Technologies, and for 5 years, we've been bringing you this show. This will be episode 50-ish, and it is our pleasure to have attorney Jason Gonzalez on the show. Quick question before we get started, Jason. What is the best state to buy college football apparel in your opinion?
Well, that would definitely be the state of Florida, because we have the Gators.
That is an excellent answer, but actually, New Jersey is the best place to buy football apparel. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. On the cybersecurity front, you may have heard of endpoint detection and response. That is the latest and greatest protection that you can bring to your office, along with two-factor authentication, email attack simulations, cyber trainings, and the usual antivirus, anti-spam protections. If you're not doing these things, talk to your IT professional. Talk to me. Talk to someone. That is it for our PSA on cybersecurity. Jason Gonzalez, welcome to the Biz and Tech Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, Jason launched his law firm that he is a founder of, Lawson Huck Gonzalez. Tell us about it. How did that come to be? And then we'll go into your background.
Well, it was just last fall we started talking about starting a new firm. I had been the managing partner of a Tallahassee office of a big 300-lawyer firm for about 9 years. I started their legal office. They had one lobbyist there, and it kind of was building up what I wanted to create in a law firm office. But back in the fall, I got a phone call from Justice Alan Lawson from the Florida Supreme Court, who was a longtime friend who I had helped work on his judicial appointment years ago to the court. And he called and said, hey, I wanted to let you be one of the first to know that I'm leaving the Florida Supreme Court. He was going to retire after 6 years on the court. And we talked all about that, and he gave me the opportunity to go tell the governor, which was a nice honor that he gave me. I went right up the hill and busted in the governor's office. They thought I was crazy. But I said, I have something to tell the governor. And because, of course, the governor gets to appoint his replacement.
Right.
So I knew he'd be excited to know that. But before I left Alan at the coffee shop, I said, when you're done on the court, when the day after you've left the court, which was going to be September 1st, I would like to sit down with you and talk about what your future plans are. And at the time I was thinking it'd be nice to bring him to my old law firm that I was at the time. And we started talking about that when we met that day. But over the next few weeks, when we came back and met again, there were some reasons why I thought maybe we ought to start our own firm. So we started having that conversation and talked to another lawyer, Paul Huck, who had left a big firm, and we all decided, let's start our own thing. So we did that in January. That's
an awesome story, and I can only imagine the front lines having someone with that background by your side going into the courtroom.
Yeah, he's just brilliant, and we've just done a major administrative hearing for the governor on a rule challenge from some Department of Education rules. And it was his first evidentiary hearing in 23 years, because he was on the circuit court in Orlando and then a district court of appeal before the Supreme Court. So it's been a long time. It was like he hadn't missed anything. In fact, his legal knowledge is deeper than anybody I have ever worked on a case with, because he has just been immersed in the law for over 22 years on the court. So it's a tremendous advantage for our clients just to have him with us, and now he's going into court and arguing some major things. He had no problem shifting from being a judge to an advocate, and a lot of judges have trouble with that. They never can really change gears and remember, you're not a judge now, you're really going to be an advocate. But he's doing that very effectively.
I can only imagine the thoughts going through people's head in the courtroom, looking around from the judge to the jury to people in chambers. That's awesome. Sounds like a player turned into a coach. If that analogy fits, we'll roll with it. But let's back up a little bit. So where'd you grow up? You're a Tallahassean, correct?
Born at Tallahassee Memorial Hospital. 1973, and grew up here. I've lived here all my life, except when I was with you down at the University of Florida for a couple of years.
The great Gator Nation. 90 days to football season, ladies and gentlemen, getting close. So during your childhood, let's dive into some questions. What was the most powerful moment as a young person, whether it was a faith-based moment, career-based moment, a path being presented to you? Any moment stick out?
Yeah, certainly growing up in a good church and just developing a relationship with God is certainly the most important moment. But I didn't have like an epiphany moment in that. I'd say maybe the most powerful moment of my childhood. I was raised around Florida government and politics. My dad and grandparents were all involved in it for many decades, and they took me to the Republican National Convention in 1988. In New Orleans, and that's something that had
Bush
a major
era?
Bush era. That was when Herbert Walker Bush was nominated, and I got to see President Reagan give his kind of farewell speech at that convention, and that had a major impact because I was kind of for a whole week immersed in all of this stuff that I had already had a major interest in. So yeah, that was probably as a 14-year-old, it was a major moment.
I remember in Dothan, Alabama, I was probably 5th, 6th grade. Reagan made a trip through Dothan, and I remember being close enough, probably could have high-fived him, but I decided not to. The Secret Service looked very serious, but just that moment as a youngster always stuck with me. So let's go to UF. We have a couple of lovely institutions of higher learning here in Tallahassee. What made you decide to make the trip down to Gainesville?
Well, I was actually raised on Florida State. My dad took me to all the games growing up as a little kid. He was student body president at FSU. But on my mom's side of the family, everybody had gone to the University of Florida way back to the very first year of the university. 1906, my great-grandfather enrolled. He happened to have been growing up in Gainesville, and he was 18, right in the year that the university was founded. And he was on the first football team in 1906, and we have a picture of him with the team.
That's awesome.
And then my granddad played football for the Gator, was a starting center in the 1930s. We weren't very good for those years in the Depression. And then my mom and uncles all went to the university. And so then I met you down there after we knew each other in high school and had a good time. But that kind of led me. I wanted to get out of town, and then I had this long background with the university through the family. So it was great place to go to school. But I wanted to come back to Tallahassee. There was never a question that I wanted to live here.
Outstanding. I remember my family, both my grandfathers went to the University of Alabama. Mom went to the University of Alabama. My Uncle Steve played on the Bear Bryant team. Wow. Nana actually lived with Bear Bryant's wife in the Alpha Gam house. So it was kind of, in their opinion, predisposed that I would be going to the University of Alabama. So it was a big shock when I joined you and other friends of ours at the University of Florida. But Kevin Smith, rest in peace. Kevin Smith, Jay Smith's brother, was SAE president in the early 90s and hosted Jay and I for a visit at the fraternity house. And one weekend derailed a lifetime of Alabama love.
That's right.
And I've loved Gainesville ever since. So go Gators. Let's talk about mentors. Do you have a mentor? Who would you say is your current mentor if you have one?
Right now, I would say Justice Lawson and Paul Huck, the two senior partners that I have started this firm with. They are both they're a calming influence on me. Sometimes I get stressed out and wound tight. And they're both better lawyers than me and just wonderful people. So I'd say both of them.
Gosh, having those skills and that camaraderie in your office, it must be special. And I think, if you think about the culture in our business world where the remote work that has become trendy and a necessity for a little bit, but become trendy, the big picture that I don't think people have verbalized globally yet is you don't get chemistry if you don't actually work with people in the same room, bouncing ideas. I can't tell if you're stressed out of your mind if I'm watching you in a Zoom call.
That's right.
But I can certainly see your body language if we're standing by the water cooler, et cetera. So it'll be interesting to see what the next few years hold. Working from home certainly has its advantages for certain project-based work, but that chemistry and that camaraderie, I wonder where that will go for, I think it was Google that said, or was it Amazon this week or last, it said, no more. You need to come to the office at least 3 days a week. Come back to the headquarters. So interesting stuff. So what's a typical day for you right now? Are you in the office? Are you working from home? Are you in court? Tell us what an average day is like.
Well, for me, I have to work in an office. There's some people that went home during COVID and could work remote. I can't be productive at home. It's nothing about anything going on at home. It's just I need to get away from the house.
Right.
But what I did find during COVID is, and when I was just recruiting folks to my young lawyers to my old firm, and today, I tell them you can work from wherever you want to work anywhere. And we've got one lawyer working in Gulf Shores, Alabama, and one in Washington State, because the remote technology is so good now. And people can come in for hearings, but a lot of what we do is collaborating over Zoom, and then and the writing really good work product, good briefs for our clients, and then we have the hearings. But the kind of cases we're doing are high profile, where we're not in county court every day, arguing over $5,000 bank collection claims. These are big cases where we have one, maybe two really big hearings a month. So we're able to work remotely. Now, I have in my office in Tallahassee, I've got Justice Lawson, and I've got Amber Nunnally, my go-to partner that I couldn't do anything I do without her, and Taylor Green, my associate, who happens to be Morgan Wallen's first cousin and grew up with Morgan Wallen in Nashville, one of his best friends. So we all work very, very closely in person each day. But we have an outstanding lawyer in Fort Lauderdale, one in Tampa, one in Miami. So we have people all over the place. But I travel a lot. My typical day, I was in Tampa yesterday, Fort Myers for a hearing in the morning, and then Tampa later in the day. I'll be in Miami tomorrow. So we travel around a ton we're meeting with clients in Miami. So the typical day is not typical. I move around and we're doing different things every day.
Awesome. And yeah, the other side of remote work, we had a staff member, one of our consultants was in Maryland the past 2 weeks visiting family, but maintaining a full workload. We had another employee that bought an RV and was like, you mind if I just work from the RV? I said, well, as long as you're, time and billable hours are rock solid, let's do it.
That's
and both
the key.
Those scenarios have worked out really well.
Right. For my people, if I see that they can produce remotely, then they're welcome to do that. I mean, with the young lawyers I've recruited, if I let them have the flexibility to pick where they want to be, if they want to be in Tampa, or because they're a young person and they don't think Tallahassee is the right place with enough young people, then I'd rather get the highest quality attorney working for me than lose the opportunity at having that person, because I'm confining them to just being in a certain place.
Awesome. So you've worked with some of our governors here in the state of Florida over the past. Pick a fave. Rick Scott, Christ, current Governor DeSantis. Let's put you on the spot.
Well, I have liked all of them, except I have some problems with Governor Christ, because he kind of betrayed all our values. It wasn't shocking, but I worked with all of them back to Governor Bush. They all were very different, and they all have unique qualities. I mean, right now, Governor DeSantis is special because he comes from kind of a similar background to mine philosophically. We were part of this same conservative lawyer group, the Federalist Society, and that's kind of how we connected years ago, even before he was in Congress. And he has governed and filled his office with people that were part of that organization, the chief of staff and general counsel, both Federalist Society lawyers, and they governed the way, unconstrained, whereas prior governors there were boundaries and the things they wouldn't get into. But you see how the voters responded. The guy who actually came in and governed the way, if I was, doing it the way I wanted to do it, he wins by 20 points. And that was extraordinary. The voters responded to the kind of policies he was doing with our people. And if you look at all the Republican governors back to Jeb, and the margin of victory, it was shrinking every single time. I mean, Jeb had this pretty good margin his first election. It shrunk when he was reelected. And then Charlie Crist had a smaller margin when he was elected than both of Governor Bush's margins of victory. And then Rick Scott was a much smaller one than the Charlie Crist victory margin, and Rick Scott's reelection was even smaller than that. And then you have DeSantis squeaking it out 34,000 votes. So it had shrunk every single time. And then Governor DeSantis governs, with this kind of philosophy of freedom and pushing back on some really bad stuff going on in our culture. And the voters responded. 20-point margin of victory. Nothing like that has happened in Florida in over 40 years. So I think it's vindication for what he's done. So he's special right now, and I hope he is successful in the presidential primaries. We'll see.
And that brings up an interesting point. So during the pandemic, as a business owner, I was concerned the government might overstep its reach, closing business, limiting what you can do, what you cannot do. We were actually an essential business, so we were, as needed. But the mask mandates that were here, I understand you had something to do with, was that in Leon County, mask mandates? Who were you representing? What went down there?
Yeah, there we were representing the Florida Department of Health, and that was one where there had been a couple of lawsuits over the parental opt-out of the school mask mandates. And other law firms were hired by the government, and they weren't so successful in the previous cases. So finally the governor said, okay, that one, get Gonzalez and his team on it. We were incredibly honored. So we're representing Department of Health, who I'd represented in some past cases. And it was 6 school boards that were challenging the administrative rules that just said that if a parent who knows their child the best and may know that the student has a speech impediment or some issue that makes wearing a mask a particularly bad problem for them, the parents could opt out of the mask mandate if the school board had a mask mandate in that county. Now, the science was that children were not anywhere near the risk that adults had. Even in the worst parts of the pandemic, it was a minimal risk, less than the flu. So the justifications for it from a medical perspective were not there to force every first grader to wear a mask. And there were real developmental problems going on. So we handled that hearing, and we won on every point. And the school board started to appeal it, and then they just dropped the appeal. So it was a great success, and the science, the data that was revealed during that hearing, I think really vindicated the governor. And the governor picked my expert in the case, which was unique. Usually we spend a lot of time trying to find the right expert to testify on these things. And he had Dr. Bhattacharya, who I did not know from the beginning of the pandemic. The governor was personally calling this guy. He's a Stanford PhD and MD and a professor out there. And the guy is just off the charts brilliant and has studied every study on COVID and the spread of it. And he's a public health expert. And governor said, this is the guy you're going to use as the expert. And he won the case for us. I mean, his command of all the facts and cut through the media narrative and got right to the real science. And we knew we were going to win when the hearing ended. After his testimony, we knew we'd be successful.
Excellent. Other high-profile cases. I saw in your bio you worked on the Deepwater Horizon situation. Walk us through that. What was that experience like?
That was a really special representation. It was such a massive case, and I was retained about a week after the explosion and sinking of the Deepwater Horizon by Transocean, which was the owner of the vessel. BP was leasing it for $1.5 million a day. A day. And so BP had the incentive to cut corners, and Transocean was getting paid $1.5 million a day, whether they were drilling in a dry hole or 24 karat gold was coming out of it. So they had no motivation to speed things up and skip safety checks and whatnot. But the BP folks were pushing to cut corners because they were way overdue on reaching the oil that they were trying to reach in that hole. But we were hired. I went out to the Coast Guard hearings the next week, and then they made the movie, The Deepwater Horizon. And one of I think I handled 70 class action cases, and one of the cases was against some of the individuals that were on the vessel, some of the estates of some of those killed. And Mike Williams, who was played by Mark Wahlberg in the Deepwater Horizon movie, was somebody I spent a lot of time with, and he was personally sued. It was a ridiculous lawsuit that we got dismissed. But if you watch that Deepwater Horizon movie, I want everybody to know that is the most accurate portrayal of a historic event, because I did not know at the time when I went to the theater to watch it. It was actually told from Mike Williams' perspective. He was a consultant on the set and as they wrote it, and they were basically telling the story from his perspective as a Transocean employee right in the middle of all of it. And as I'm watching the movie, I'm realizing, well, that's exactly what Mike had told me, and now I think they're going to go down this hallway, and then this is going to happen, and they're going to get this safety alert or what. And it was exactly what he had described. And then after I left the theater, I looked it up, and sure enough, the movie was based on his story, and it was an incredible series of events, very tragic. But BP paid dearly. Transocean paid, but they got out of it in a much different place than BP. It's very unfortunate what happened, and I think a lot of lessons were learned from it. But we had, I think, over 70 lawsuits. We got all of them either dismissed or transferred out of the state. So it was a great victory for us. That was 2 law firms ago when I was doing those cases.
So we talked about a couple cases. What's been the most interesting case you've worked on in your career, whether current or in the past? What's number one?
Oh, golly. I've handled so many interesting ones, a bunch of Supreme Court cases over constitutional amendments. The Deepwater Horizon was certainly very interesting. I think really one of the most kind of entertaining was we defended the Department of Health when Joe Redner, who owns all the strip clubs, some of the strip clubs in Tampa, he sued the Department of Health claiming he had a constitutional right to grow his own marijuana. That was entertaining and a fun one to litigate. And we drew a judge that I warned everybody, she has done some wild things before, and I'm going to predict she's actually going to declare there's a constitutional right to grow your own marijuana, and then we'll get it reversed at the First District Court of Appeals. And of course,
did he have medical reasons?
Well, he said he had his cancer was in remission, and he claimed he had the medical marijuana to juice it, and he was going to drink the juice of the medical marijuana. Now, to juice marijuana and have the amount he wanted to drink, he would need a couple of football fields of greenhouses to actually have enough.
He wanted to personally juice them.
Oh, yeah. He was going to grow it, juice it. That was his claim, as he was going to juice it and drink it. And I'll tell you that, from all the experts, that would burn a hole in your throat. That stuff is so acidic if you do actually juice that much. So it was bizarre stuff that he claimed. There was no data that drinking juiced marijuana is going to keep cancer in remission. But anyway, it was entertaining, and sure enough, I warned everybody, and sure enough, that trial court judge declared that there is a constitutional right to grow your own marijuana, and then we had it reversed at the First District Court of Appeals. The Supreme Court wouldn't even take the appeal. They said that's ridiculous. So it was fun. You can imagine how entertaining it was. And Joe Redner, his folks started filming a documentary somewhere along the way when they thought they were going to win in front of the trial court, because he thought, we're going to have this huge victory. I want a documentary about how I litigated to give everybody a right to grow your own marijuana. Well, the cameras disappeared after they lost on the appeal, and I've never seen a documentary. So it was
work in progress. They call that.
Yes.
Good stuff. So speaking of Hollywood, who would play you in the movie about your life?
Oh, well, I've been told who's the guy that was in the star of Shawshank Redemption. I used to be told that he looked like me. So, yeah, I guess. What's his name?
See that. I was going to go with Justin Bateman, from Arrested Development, and that's probably not his most famous role, but that's one of my favorites. Who is that guy? Well, we'll think of it. Yeah. We'll think of it later.
Tim Robbins.
We go.
No, not Tim Robbins.
Yeah, that's Tim Robbins.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, good stuff. Mm-hmm. So if you had a high school band, what would you call that band?
Well, I had actually played in a couple of bands in high school. They were all terrible. Well, one of them was okay, but so one of them was called Childhood. That was it was Noel. Did you know Noel Harto?
That was. Haven't heard that name in a long time.
He was the lead singer of that band. Yeah.
Nice. In the immortal words of Ty Thompson, there are no bad bands, just bad music.
Mm-hmm.
Ha.
There was some bad music that we made in high school, for sure.
All right. So what's the most important issue facing our nation right now, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's forgotten a lot right now, but I think the national debt is a big problem. I mean, I wish we had a balanced budget amendment at the federal level like we have in Florida. Florida, you have to balance the budget, and that's the one thing I think our founders really dropped the ball on. They should have done something there, but they could have had some exception for national crisis where you've got to go into some debt temporarily, but to just allow Congress to just keep borrowing, at some point, there's going to be a reckoning. But you see how sound the state of Florida is, and the states like Illinois, California, Massachusetts that do not have a balanced budget requirement, they're a financial wreck. So and then their people are getting taxed to death. It's a shame, but that's really I think a big problem. But nobody's talking about it right now, and it just is out of control.
So let's stick with politics for a second. Currently in office, who would you say is your favorite Republican in office right now, state or national?
It would have to be Governor DeSantis. I love everything he's doing. He's a decent person, and his wife. They're motivated by the right things. They're not independently wealthy. I think they understand the average Floridian the way some others may not. Not that there's anything wrong with like being a self-made multimillionaire like Rick Scott. That's a wonderful thing from where he came from. But Governor DeSantis, I just love the way he's governed, and it's been successful, and the voters have responded very well.
All right, so along with politics, who's the most annoying person on the planet? If you had to name one person, whether that is from Hollywood or here in Tallahassee, somewhere, there's got to be someone that just irks you.
Well, Joy Behar on The View is pretty darn annoying. I think there's pretty much universal agreement on that.
Okay.
But locally, there's some folks, but I don't want to say their names.
That's very diplomatic of you. So here's a question. If you had to watch one movie or television program for the rest of your life, what would that be?
Oh, golly. A movie that I would want to watch.
Or TV.
Yeah. Braveheart is a favorite. I've always thought that's just an incredible movie. I think it's a historical fiction, mostly fiction, but it's pretty good.
Yeah, it holds up very well. Mm-hmm. I can't wait for Hollywood to get a hold of Pillars of the Earth. Have you ever read it?
No, I have not.
So it's about a guy named Tom the Builder cruising around in the, 1100s? He builds churches, and while that doesn't sound very exciting for a 900-page novel, it's unbelievable. It's an amazing book. Pick it up.
I will.
Pillars of the Earth, Ken Follett. So what are you reading right now?
I am reading a part of the book of Acts in the Bible is what I'm working through right now. So
Okay.
I rarely read fiction because I go to work every day and am buried in reading all day long. So when I come home, other than reading the Bible, I don't relax by reading fiction because I just am so buried in reading cases at work. That's pretty boring. That's a pretty boring
That's interesting perspective because I try to get away from the computer screen when I come home. I like diving into an old-fashioned book, and I just picked up a series, The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher, like 20 books about a detective who's also a wizard. It's very, very interesting. It was a sci-fi show briefly. Anywho, awesome. So your law firm, who should contact Lawson Huck Gonzalez? You work with a lot of state agencies, Fortune 1000 companies. Who's your average client?
Yeah, when we left the old firm in January, February, that was a frightening moment because I had about 24 clients, and the Florida bar rules don't let you call your clients and say, "Hey, I'm leaving, and will you please come with me?" It's kind of rigged for the big law firm to keep my clients. Those clients were all at the old firm because they wanted me to represent them. But the law firm gets to send a letter to my clients, and it was the likes of Publix and Florida Power and Light, big companies, Tampa Electric, and then the government agencies, Department of Health, Department of Transportation, those type of entities. But yeah, the law firm gets to send a letter, and it just says Jason Gonzalez has resigned and is going to the Lawson Huck Gonzalez law firm, which didn't really exist at the moment they're getting that letter. They're Googling it and nothing comes up. But fortunately, and so I sweated it out for several days, and they have to check a box at the bottom. They can check the box that they're going to come with me and go to the new law firm, or they can check the box they're staying at the old law firm.
You're Jerry Maguire, man.
Yeah. And then, or they can stay with both, or they can ditch both law firms. And so for 2 weeks, I just lost sleep wondering, I think they'll come with us, but what if they don't? They've got to be wondering, why didn't I give them a heads up? Well, I'd get disbarred if I unethically contacted them under this rule, which we're going to try to get changed. We're going to ask the Supreme Court to do away with that. But in any event, sure enough, every one of them, all 24, check the box that they're moving with us. And I talked to a couple of them afterwards. Well, I talked to all of them afterwards, and they said, we were surprised you didn't call. I said, I couldn't call, and they didn't realize that was the rule. But they all said, we looked at it, we thought it was odd, but we trusted that you knew what you're doing, and you must be bringing people with you that could continue to give us the same quality representation. So that's something that I'm just so thankful to all of them for, that they took that leap of faith with us and joined us. So we started out already on track to have a very successful year, and then this avalanche of new work, because I thought that may happen with Justice Lawson and with Paul Huck. People don't know as much about Paul up in Tallahassee, but he and his wife, Barbara Lagoa, who's on the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals and was on the Supreme Court herself a couple of years ago, they are royalty in Miami. They are just beloved people down there. But the combination, we've had this avalanche of new work, probably 3 times. I had enough work for all of us when I left, but we're probably 3 times, 4 times the amount of legal work. So we started with 5 lawyers February 3rd. We have added a lawyer on average. At one point, it was every 8 days we had to add another lawyer. So we're up to 11 right now in just 4 months, which is more than doubling, is extraordinary growth. And I could add 5 more right now. It's just astounding. There have been cases I tried to give to my old firm. I tried one huge case that the government was sued on. I just didn't see how I could handle it. But the governor wanted us to do it, even though I told them they just give it to the old firm. They want to handle it, but the governor wanted us to do it, and and we've got enough new attorneys now that we think we are going to handle it and prevail. So we're excited to do that. But it's been wonderful.
Well, congratulations on the early success of the firm. I got to know your organization early on, writing a column for FloridaPolitics.com, interviewing those founding partners. So tell me this, biggest win, that's our last question for the day, biggest win of your first year firm.
Well, we have...
Because I saw something about insurance in a Facebook post. Was that one of them?
We did. That was one. We defeated a motion to dismiss in a big insurance case, and because of defeating that, the court is basically recognizing the validity of a few of our affirmative defenses, which means we're ultimately going to win the final ruling in that case. The case we just had at the Division of Administrative Hearings for the Department of Education, where they were these teachers unions challenging the Department of Education rules that just went into place that were designed to put safeguards in to prevent pornography from slipping into public school libraries. They had found 200 wildly inappropriate books in public school libraries around the state. Even though pornography was already prohibited, it was slipping in, and people were certain teachers with really bad judgment were bringing things in their classroom, kind of indoctrination materials. So the Department of Education put these rules in place. We were asked to handle the hearing, defending the rules that are going to safeguard against that ever happening again. We feel very confident we're going to prevail. The hearing is over, but these administrative cases, the administrative law judge gets about a month to prepare the order and issue it. But we feel very confident that's going to be our first big final hearing victory, and we've got a lot going on. The big battle with Disney over the Reedy Creek district, but that's in the early stages. So it takes a while. You start some of these cases, it can be a year or two before you get a final ruling.
Well, you guys are coming out of the gate like the 1996 Florida Gators, beating the opponents 70-7 on an average weekend. Thank you, Jason, for joining us today for the Biz and Tech podcast. If you want to check out more information on Lawson Huck Gonzalez, check them out online. Check them out online, and thank you for joining us on the Biz and Tech podcast.
Thank you, Blake.
We'll see you next time. My name's Blake. Have a great day. Have a great tomorrow, and update your cybersecurity.